Hello and welcome back to 10-Minute Episode. I am your host, Alex, and today we are venturing into the fascinating, sometimes frustrating, and incredibly complex world of the human mind. If you are learning a new language, or even if you are just trying to master your own, you have undoubtedly experienced this. You're in the middle of a sentence. You know exactly what you want to say, but suddenly your mind goes completely blank. The word is gone. Today, we are asking why. Why does your brain forget words? To help us unpack the cognitive psychology behind this phenomenon, I am joined by Dr. Elena Martinez, a cognitive psychologist specializing in language acquisition and memory retrieval. Elena, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Alex. It is a pleasure to be here. This is a topic that resonates with absolutely everyone, whether they are learning their second language or their fifth. The brain is a remarkable machine, but it is not flawless, and those moments of going blank are actually a perfect window into how our cognitive architecture operates.
Let us start right there, at that moment of going blank. We've all been in a conversation, maybe at a coffee shop or in a high-stakes business meeting, trying to speak a new language. We studied the vocabulary the night before, we know the word, we can almost taste it, but we just cannot produce it. What is physically and psychologically happening in the brain when that occurs?
What you're describing is beautifully termed the tip of the tongue phenomenon, or TOT state. In cognitive psychology, we refer to this as a failure of retrieval. To understand this, we need to quickly look at how memory works. Memory involves three main stages: encoding, storage, and retrieval. Encoding is how you first learn the word. You read it in a textbook, you hear it in a song. Storage is your brain filing it away in your long-term memory network. But retrieval is the act of pulling that specific file out of the cabinet exactly when you need it. When you go blank, the word is still in storage. It hasn't been erased, but the pathway to retrieve it has been temporarily blocked or disrupted.
So I haven't actually forgotten the word, it's still in there somewhere.
Exactly. You haven't lost the information. You've just temporarily lost access to it. This happens for a few reasons, especially in a new language. The first is called cognitive overload. When you speak your native language, the process of finding words, applying grammar, and moving your mouth is highly automated. We call this procedural memory. It runs in the background. But when you speak a new language, you're using your working memory. Your working memory is like the RAM in a computer. It has a very limited capacity. You're consciously thinking about verb conjugations, pronunciation, the social context, and the vocabulary all at once. The system simply gets overwhelmed and the retrieval process crashes.
That makes so much sense. So it's not that I have a bad memory, it's that I'm asking my brain to do too much conscious heavy lifting all at the same exact moment.
Precisely. And there's another massive factor here, which brings us to the psychology of emotion. We call it the affective filter. When we try to speak a new language, we often feel vulnerable. We're afraid of making mistakes, of sounding foolish, or of being judged. This anxiety triggers the brain's stress response. The amygdala, which is the brain's emotional center, basically sounds an alarm. When that alarm rings, the brain redirects energy away from the prefrontal cortex, the logical, word-finding part of your brain, and prepares for a fight or flight response. Your brain literally shuts down your access to complex vocabulary because it thinks you're in physical danger.
That's astonishing. Our brains are reacting to a conversation in Spanish or French the same way they would react to a physical threat?
Yes, to your primitive brain, social embarrassment is a severe threat. So when you feel that panic rising because you can't remember a word, the worst thing you can do is try to force it. The harder you try, the more stressed you become, and the stronger that mental block grows. The affective filter becomes a brick wall.
Okay, so we have these great concepts: the tip of the tongue phenomenon, retrieval failure, cognitive overload, and the affective filter. I want to shift into the practice element for our listeners. How do we articulate these struggles? Often, language learners just stop talking. They say, "I forgot," and the conversation dies. How can we use the vocabulary of the mind to explain what is happening to our speaking partner?
That's a vital skill. Being able to explain your cognitive block is, ironically, a great way to practice language. Instead of just saying, I don't know, which is a conversation killer, you can describe your mental state. You can say something like, I'm experiencing a momentary retrieval failure. Or, more colloquially, the word is on the tip of my tongue, but I can't quite grasp it right now. You can also say, my brain is experiencing a bit of cognitive overload right now. Give me a second to process this.
I love that. Give me a second to process this. It sounds professional and it buys you time. What about when the word simply refuses to come back? The affective filter is up, the working memory is full. What is the psychological strategy to keep the conversation moving?
The most powerful tool a language learner can master is called circumlocution. Circumlocution simply means talking around the word. If your brain can't access the specific noun, you use your available vocabulary to describe its function, its appearance, or its category. You bypass the blocked neural pathway by taking a detour.
Can you give us an example of how circumlocution works in real time? Let's say I forget the word for umbrella.
Right. If you stop and panic because the word umbrella is blocked, you lose fluency. But if you use circumlocution, you access related concepts in your semantic network. You might say, it's the object you hold over your head when it's raining so you don't get wet. By describing it, not only do you communicate your point successfully to your listener, but you actually reduce your anxiety. You bypass the affective filter, and very often, once the pressure is off and you start describing the object, the original word suddenly pops into your head.
Because you lowered the stress, the amygdala calms down and the prefrontal cortex can finally do its job and retrieve the file.
Exactly. You essentially tricked your brain into relaxing. This is why perfectionism is the enemy of language learning. Perfectionists want to retrieve the exact right word every single time. When they can't, they freeze. Effective learners accept that retrieval failure is a normal part of cognitive processing. They embrace circumlocution. They view missing a word not as a failure, but as a puzzle to solve using the words they do have.
Let us talk about how we can strengthen our memory so that these retrieval failures happen less frequently. We mentioned encoding earlier, putting the information into our brains. Is there a right and wrong way to encode vocabulary?
Absolutely. The traditional way of learning vocabulary is rote memorization, looking at a list of words and their translations and repeating them over and over. Psychologically speaking, this is highly inefficient. It creates weak neural pathways. The brain is excellent at filtering out meaningless information. If a word has no context, no emotion, and no connection to your life, your brain will discard it almost immediately. This is known as the Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. Unless you actively interrupt the forgetting process, you'll lose the vast majority of what you learn within a few days.
The Ebbinghaus forgetting curve. So rote memorization leads to weak encoding. How do we create strong encoding? How do we build a superhighway to that word in our long-term memory?
We have to use a process called elaborative rehearsal. This means connecting the new piece of information to things you already know. Let's take the English word meticulous, which means showing great attention to detail. If you just try to memorize the definition, you will likely forget it. But if you picture your very organized friend David, who color coordinates his socks and alphabetizes his spices, and you say out loud, David is incredibly meticulous about his kitchen, you have just created a strong mental image. You have attached emotion, personal relevance, and visual context to the word.
You are building multiple pathways to the same word. If the direct definition pathway fails, the David's kitchen pathway might still succeed.
Precisely. You are enriching the semantic network. The more associations a word has, the easier it is to retrieve. Another critical strategy is spaced repetition combined with active recall. Active recall is the psychological opposite of passive reading. When you read a list of words, it feels easy, creating an illusion of competence. You think you know the word because you recognize it, but recognition is not the same as retrieval.
The illusion of competence. That happens to me all the time. I read a book in a foreign language and think, wow, I know all these words. But if you asked me to write a summary of the page, I wouldn't be able to produce half of them.
Right. Recognition relies on external cues. The word is on the page, so your brain just says, yes, I have seen that before. Retrieval requires you to generate the word entirely from within your own mind, with no external help. It is significantly harder. To strengthen memory, you must practice active recall. You must force your brain to struggle to find the word. That struggle, that slight feeling of frustration, is actually the neurological signal that tells your brain this information is important. Make the neural connections stronger.
So the pain of trying to remember is actually the process of learning.
Yes, neuroplasticity, the brain's ability to reorganize itself by forming new neural connections, requires effort, and this effort must be spaced out over time, which brings in spaced repetition. You try to recall the word today, then you wait 2 days and try again, then you wait a week, then a month. By repeatedly forcing retrieval just as you are about to forget the word, you cement it firmly into your long-term memory.
Elena, this is incredibly empowering. It shifts the blame. When we go blank, we usually say, I'm stupid or I'm bad at languages. But what you're saying is that going blank is a mechanical issue. It's a predictable result of working memory limits, the effective filter, or weak encoding strategies.
Exactly, Alex. Your brain is doing exactly what it evolved to do. It prioritizes survival over producing perfect grammar. It manages limited resources. When you understand the psychology of your language learning, you stop fighting your brain and start collaborating with it. You learn to breathe through the effective filter. You learn to use circumlocution when retrieval fails. And you learn to study using active recall and elaborative rehearsal so that your memory networks grow deep and resilient.
I want to summarize some of the incredible vocabulary we have covered today as part of our practice element for our listeners. We discussed the tip of the tongue phenomenon, or TOT state, which is a retrieval failure. We talked about how working memory gets overwhelmed, leading to cognitive overload. We learned that anxiety raises the effective filter, causing the amygdala to shut down the word-finding parts of our brain. And to fight back, we need to avoid rote memorization and the illusion of competence, and instead use elaborative rehearsal, active recall, and circumlocution.
That is a brilliant summary, Alex. If a learner can incorporate not just those study techniques, but that exact vocabulary to describe their own learning journey, they will become incredibly articulate about their own mental processes. There's immense power in metacognition, thinking about how you think.
Metacognition, another fantastic term to add to the list. Dr. Elena Martinez, this has been an incredibly enlightening conversation. Thank you for taking us deep into the cognitive psychology of language on the 10 Minutes episode.
The pleasure was entirely mine, Alex. Keep practicing and remember to be kind to your brain.
To all our listeners, the next time your mind goes blank, do not panic. Take a breath, bypass that effective filter, and talk your way around the problem. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you on the next episode.